The night began the way most nights did in that house, quiet, predictable, almost too neat for the thoughts I kept buried. Rain pressed gently against the windows, not loud enough to be dramatic, just steady enough to make everything feel suspended in time. The hallway light flickered the way it always did, a small electrical flaw no one bothered to fix. I told myself I liked it that way. Imperfect things felt honest. I was alone, or at least, I thought I was. The house still smelled faintly of his cologne, even though he hadn't been there all day. Clean, sharp, familiar in a way that made my chest tighten before my mind could catch up. I tried to focus on the ordinary things, my shoes by the door, the hum of the refrigerator, the clock ticking just a little too loudly, but my thoughts kept circling back to him. Ethan. We had known each other long enough that silence between us wasn't awkward anymore. It was loaded. Every pause carried history, unsaid words, glances held for a beat too long. He was older than me, calmer on the surface, the kind of man who never raised his voice because he never needed to. People listened when he spoke. I always did. I told myself I admired his confidence. I didn't admit how much it unsettled me. That evening, I noticed something small and wrong. His jacket wasn't on the hook where he always left it. At first, I assumed he'd taken it with him. But the hook itself was still swinging slightly, like it had been touched moments ago. That didn't make sense. I stood there longer than I should have, listening. The rain, the clock, my own breathing. The house felt different, too aware of me, like it was holding a secret it wasn't ready to give up. You're imagining things, I thought. I always did that. Overanalyzed, romanticized, let my mind wander into places it had no business going. Still, I didn't move. My phone buzzed in my hand, startling me enough that my heart actually skipped. A message from Ethan. You home? I stared at the screen, suddenly aware of how quiet everything had become. Even the rain seemed to hesitate. Yes, I typed, then deleted it, typed it again, sent. The reply came almost instantly. Good. Don't lock your door. My throat went dry. There was nothing overtly wrong with the message. No explanation. No warning. And yet, something in the way he said it, so certain, so casual, made my stomach twist with a feeling I didn't want to name. I told myself I could still say no. I told myself I was in control of my own space, my own choices, my own body. But I didn't lock the door. Instead, I stood in the dim hallway, heart pounding, wondering why a part of me hoped he was already closer than I realized, and what it would mean if he was the one about to decide what happened next. The days that followed settled into a rhythm that felt deliberate, almost rehearsed. Mornings were quiet, afternoons stretched thin, nights grew heavier with unspoken things. The rain stopped, replaced by a dull, overcast sky that pressed low against the house, as if the world itself were leaning in to listen. Ethan started coming over more often after that message. Not announcing himself. Just appearing. I'd hear the door open softly, the familiar click of his shoes against the floor, and my body would react before my mind did. A tightening, a strange alertness, like prey sensing movement in tall grass. Hey, he'd say, voice calm, eyes already on me. Hey, I'd answer, pretending I wasn't already unraveling. We never talked about that night. About the message. About why he'd told me not to lock the door. Silence became our agreement, and somehow, that made everything more dangerous. Every shared glance felt intentional. Every brush of space between us felt charged. He started noticing things. You're not sleeping much, he said one evening, watching me from the kitchen doorway. I was sitting on the couch, knees pulled up, pretending to read. I'm fine. You say that when you're not. I didn't look up. You always think you know me better than I know myself. A pause. Then, softer, I do. That should have irritated me. Instead, it sent a shiver through my spine. Ethan had a way of moving through rooms like he belonged there, like the walls had been built around him. When he sat beside me, he didn't crowd my space, but he didn't retreat either. Just close enough that I could feel his warmth. Just close enough that leaving would have felt like a decision instead of an accident. I started catching myself waiting for him, listening for his footsteps, watching the clock, feeling disappointed when hours passed without him showing up. That realization scared me more than anything else. I'd spent years telling myself I was independent, careful, in control. Yet here I was, measuring my nights by the possibility of his presence. One evening, something changed. I was in my room when I heard it, a sound from downstairs. Not loud, not sudden, just wrong, like a drawer being opened too slowly. My heart kicked up instantly. "Ethan," I called out, already knowing it was him. No answer. I stood there, debating. Every instinct told me to stay put, to wait, to let him announce himself the way he usually did. But curiosity won. Or maybe it was something darker. Something reckless. I went downstairs. He was in the living room, back to me, looking at the framed photos on the shelf. His jacket was off. His sleeves rolled up. He hadn't turned on the lights. "You're early," I said. "I didn't say I was coming tonight." "That's kind of the problem," I replied, trying to sound casual. He turned then, slowly. His eyes settled on me in a way that made it impossible to pretend this was normal. "Does it bother you?" he asked. "Yes," I said. Then, after a beat, "No." A faint smile touched his mouth, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Which one is the lie?" I didn't answer. He stepped closer, not invading my space, just narrowing it. The air felt thicker between us, like the house itself was holding its breath. "You've been different," he said quietly. "Restless, distant, curious." I laughed once, sharp and nervous. "You sound like you're diagnosing me." "I'm observing." "Why?" "Because you want me to." The words landed hard. I felt exposed, like he'd reached into my chest and pulled something out I wasn't ready to see. My pulse hammered in my ears. Part of me wanted to deny it, to push back, to reclaim some sense of control. Instead, I whispered, "You don't know what I want." He tilted his head slightly, studying me. "Then tell me to leave." I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. That was the moment I realized how far I'd already gone. After that, the boundaries blurred fast. Too fast. Conversations turned into interrogations. Casual touches lingered longer than they should have. His presence began to dictate my mood, my thoughts, my sleep. I hated how much I noticed him. The way his jaw tightened when he was annoyed. The way his voice dropped when he was serious. The way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention, like he was measuring something, deciding something. One night, we sat across from each other at the kitchen table, a single lamp casting long shadows on the walls. The power had gone out during a storm, and candles flickered between us. "This feels dangerous," I said suddenly. He didn't look surprised. "Because it is." "Then why are you still here?" He leaned back in his chair, eyes never leaving mine. "You haven't asked me to go." My fingers curled into my palm. "That doesn't mean you should stay." "Maybe," he said, "but you like that I don't need permission." The honesty of it stole my breath. I stood up abruptly, needing space, needing air. "You're crossing lines." He rose too, slower, deliberate. "You drew them too close." "Stop," I said, though my voice lacked conviction. He stopped moving. Completely. The restraint in that moment was almost worse than if he'd kept going. "Say the word," he said quietly. "And I will." I searched his face, looking for manipulation, for cruelty, for something that would make this easier. I found none of it. Just certainty, and something else beneath it. Something intense, focused, almost protective in its own twisted way. My silence stretched. The candles flickered. The storm rattled the windows. The house felt impossibly small. Finally, he spoke again, softer now. "You don't have to decide tonight." Relief and disappointment collided in my chest. But even as he stepped back, even as he gave me space, I knew the truth. This wasn't over. It was only beginning. And somewhere deep inside me, a question echoed, terrifying in its clarity. What happens when he stops asking? The shift happened on a night that didn't look important at first. No storm, no warning, just a low, restless wind brushing against the house, rattling something loose in the gutters. I was in the kitchen, rinsing a mug I hadn't finished, when the lights dimmed for half a second and came back on. Enough to make me pause. Enough to make my pulse jump. I told myself to relax. That's when I heard the door. Not the front door. The back. It opened slowly, deliberately, like whoever was on the other side knew exactly how much sound they were making. I didn't turn around right away. My hands stayed under the running water. My shoulders stiffened. "You're late," I said, forcing steadiness into my voice. "I didn't say I was coming," Ethan replied from behind me. The same words as before. Different weight this time. I shut off the tap and turned. He was standing just inside the doorway, jacket still on, eyes darker than usual. There was something in his posture that made my breath hitch, not aggressive, not rushed. Controlled, like he'd already decided how this night would unfold and was simply waiting to see if I'd resist. "You scared me," I said. "I didn't mean to," he replied, and I believed him. That somehow made it worse. Silence stretched between us, thick and vibrating. I became hyper-aware of everything, the hum of the fridge, the faint creak of the floor as he shifted his weight, the way my heartbeat felt too loud inside my chest. "You've been avoiding me," he said. "I've been busy." "With what?" I hesitated. That was the problem. I always did. "With thinking," I finally said. His gaze sharpened. "About me." It wasn't a question. I swallowed. "About us. About what this is turning into." He stepped closer. One step, then another, each one measured, giving me time to pull away if I wanted to. I didn't. "What do you think it's turning into?" he asked. "Something dangerous. Something irreversible. Something I wanted more than I should." I couldn't say any of that out loud. "I think," I said instead, "that you like knowing I don't know where I stand with you." His jaw tightened slightly. "And I think you like not having to decide." The words hit too close to home. "That's not fair." "No," he agreed. "It isn't." He stopped less than an arm's length away. I could smell his cologne again, clean, grounding, maddening. My body responded before my mind could catch up, a traitorous warmth spreading through me that filled me with guilt even as it pulled me closer. "This needs to stop," I said. "Then say it like you mean it." I tried. I really did. But the truth pressed against my ribs, heavy and undeniable. I was tired of being careful. Tired of pretending this was something I could control by thinking it to death. "I don't trust myself around you," I admitted quietly. Something flickered across his face at that. Surprise. Relief. Something darker. "That's why you should," he said. "I'm not guessing here. I'm not pushing without watching. Every step I've taken, you've let me." His hand lifted, not touching me, not yet. Hovering near my wrist. Waiting. The room felt like it was tilting. "If you take that step," I whispered, "things change." They already have. I closed my eyes. For a moment, I let myself imagine walking away. Going upstairs. Locking the door. Reclaiming the version of myself that believed restraint was strength. But another version of me, the one that had been holding its breath for weeks, stepped forward instead. I nodded. Just once. That was all it took. His hand closed around my wrist, firm but not rough, grounding in a way that sent a jolt straight through me. He didn't pull, didn't rush, just held me there, making sure I understood exactly what I'd agreed to. "You can still stop this," he said softly. I met his eyes. "I know." The look that crossed his face then was almost reverent. Like he understood the weight of what I was offering. Like he intended to carry it carefully, or not at all. He guided me back a step. Then another, until the counter pressed lightly against my lower back. The kitchen felt smaller, shadows stretching along the walls, enclosing us in something intimate and undeniable. His other hand came up, stopping just short of my face. "Tell me if this is too much," he murmured. My voice shook. "It's already too much." "Then why are you still here?" "Because I wanted to see how far he'd go. Because I wanted to know how far I'd let him." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The space between us vanished, not in a rush, but in a quiet, inevitable collapse. His forehead rested against mine. His breath mingled with mine. Time slowed until every second felt deliberate, heavy with consequence. And then, footsteps. Not ours. From upstairs. My body went rigid. Ethan froze too, every muscle instantly alert. His grip loosened but didn't disappear. We listened, barely breathing, as the sound repeated, soft, unmistakable. Someone moving where no one should have been. Are we alone? He whispered. A cold realization crept up my spine. I thought we were, I said. The footsteps stopped. Silence fell again, thicker than before, charged with something new and terrifying. Ethan's eyes flicked toward the ceiling, then back to me, calculating. Whatever had been building between us didn't vanish. It sharpened, because now there was a witness we hadn't planned for. A secret no longer contained. A line crossed with no clear way back. Ethan leaned in, voice low, urgent, certain. Whatever happens next, he said, you stay with me. My heart pounded as the question formed in my mind, unavoidable and dangerous. Had I just given up control, or had I finally learned what it felt like to choose not to have it? The footsteps never came back. That was the strangest part. Minutes passed, maybe seconds, maybe longer. Time lost its shape. Ethan's hand slowly released my wrist, not because he was retreating, but because something else had entered the room with us. Something colder. He took a step sideways, placing himself slightly in front of me without thinking, without asking. The gesture was subtle, instinctive, protective. Did you hear where it stopped? He whispered. I shook my head. My mouth felt dry, like I'd forgotten how to use it. Every sound in the house seemed amplified now, the faint buzz of the overhead light, the low thud of my heartbeat, the soft fabric sound of Ethan's sleeve brushing my arm as he shifted. I locked the back gate earlier, I said, mostly to convince myself. No one should be. A creak cut me off. Not upstairs this time. Closer. Somewhere down the hall. Ethan's jaw tightened. His eyes flicked toward the corridor, then back to me. In that glance, something changed between us. The tension that had been circling desire now fused with fear, with secrecy. Whatever this was, it wasn't just about us anymore. Stay here, he said quietly. No. I replied immediately, grabbing his sleeve. The word came out sharper than I expected. Don't leave me alone. He looked down at my hand gripping his arm, then back at my face. Slowly, deliberately, he covered my hand with his own. Warm, steady. I'm not going anywhere, he said. But we need to know. We moved together down the hallway, steps careful, almost synchronized. The house felt unfamiliar now, like a place pretending to be safe. Shadows clung to the corners. Doors looked taller, more watchful. The sound came again, a soft exhale. Human. My stomach dropped. Ethan stopped so suddenly I nearly collided with him. He lifted a hand, signaling silence. We stood there, bodies close but no longer touching, listening. Then a voice. Low. Familiar. I didn't know you'd be home. The words came from the guest room doorway. Marcus. My brother. The world tilted. He stood half in shadow, eyes flicking between us, taking in the scene too quickly. Ethan's proximity, my flushed face, the way neither of us stepped away. The air felt thick with something unspeakable, something that snapped into place all at once. How long have you been here? I asked, my voice barely holding together. Long enough, he said. His gaze lingered on Ethan. I heard voices. I thought someone broke in. No one spoke. Ethan was the first to move, stepping back just enough to create space. Not distance. Just control. This isn't what it looks like, he said calmly. Marcus laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. Really? Because it looks like you crossed a line you don't get to uncross. My chest burned. Guilt surged up, fast and unforgiving. Not because of what almost happened, but because of who had seen it. You weren't supposed to be here, I said. That's funny, Marcus replied. I was going to say the same thing. Silence fell again, heavier than before. Ethan glanced at me, searching my face, waiting. For what? I wasn't sure. Permission, direction, a signal that I still wanted him there. I didn't give him any of it. Instead, I felt the weight of what had nearly happened settle into my bones. The realization that it wasn't just desire driving this, it was secrecy. Power, the thrill of being seen and not stopping. Marcus stepped back, shaking his head slowly. I need some air, he muttered. You too. Figure out whatever this is. He left without waiting for a response, the front door closing behind him with a final, echoing thud. The house exhaled. Ethan turned to me, his expression unreadable now. The intensity hadn't disappeared, it had transformed. Sharpened by consequence. I didn't plan this, he said quietly. I know. That was the problem. We stood there, inches apart, surrounded by what-ifs and almosts and the undeniable truth that something irreversible had already occurred, even without being touched. Outside, the wind picked up again, rattling the windows like a warning. Ethan broke the silence last. This doesn't end tonight. I met his gaze, heart still racing, mind spiraling with fear and want and shame all at once. No. I agreed. It didn't. The only question left, one that refused to let me sleep, was whether I was afraid of what would happen next. Or of how badly I wanted to find out. The house never felt the same after that. Even in daylight, it carried the echo of what had almost happened, what had happened, even without proof. The walls seemed closer, the rooms less forgiving. I started noticing the quiet in a different way. Not peaceful, watchful. Marcus barely spoke to me the next morning. He moved through the kitchen like a guest, polite but distant, eyes sliding away whenever mine searched for them. He didn't ask questions. That hurt more than if he had. Silence, I was learning, could be its own accusation. Ethan didn't come over. That was worse. Hours passed. Then days. No unannounced entrances. No casual messages. No presence filling the rooms with that charged, unsettling calm. I told myself this was what I'd wanted. Space, clarity, control restored. It felt like withdrawal. Every time my phone buzzed, my chest tightened. Every time it didn't, something hollow opened inside me. I replayed that night over and over, analyzing every look, every word, every moment where I could have stopped things sooner, or let them go further. At night, I lay awake listening to the house settle, wondering if footsteps would return. They never did. On the third day, Marcus finally broke. You don't have to explain, he said, standing in the doorway of my room. But don't pretend nothing changed. I nodded. That was all I could manage. After he left, I sat on the edge of my bed, hands shaking, realizing how much damage could be done without anyone ever touching you. That evening, my phone lit up. A message from Ethan. We need to talk. My pulse spiked instantly, heat flooding my chest, followed by fear just as sharp. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. About what? The dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. About what we're pretending didn't happen. I almost didn't respond. Almost. Where? The reply came immediately. You know where. I did. The house. When he arrived, he knocked. That alone told me everything had shifted. I opened the door to find him standing there, hands in his pockets, expression controlled but tight around the edges. He looked tired, focused, like a man who'd made a decision he hadn't shared yet. I won't come in unless you ask, he said. The words landed heavier than anything he'd said before. I studied his face, searching for the certainty I'd leaned on so easily. It was still there, but tempered now by restraint. Consequence. Come in, I said, stepping aside. He did, slowly. We stood in the same hallway where it had all begun, distance carefully maintained, tension humming between us like a live wire. Neither of us reached out. Neither of us apologized. I should have stopped, he said finally. So should I replied. Our eyes locked. The truth sat between us, raw and unresolved. Stopping hadn't been what either of us wanted. This changes things, he said. Yes. But it doesn't end them. That wasn't a question. I felt the familiar pull tighten in my chest, the same dangerous mix of fear and desire, now sharpened by the knowledge that we couldn't go back. We could only go forward, or walk away. I took a slow breath. What happens if we keep going? His gaze darkened, intent and unreadable. Then next time, he said quietly, there won't be interruptions. My heart slammed against my ribs. I should have said no. Instead, I asked the only question that mattered now, the one that would decide everything. Are you still going to ask me to choose? He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel his presence again, controlled and inevitable. That, he said, voice low, depends on whether you still want the illusion of control. The house held its breath. So did I. And as the door clicked shut behind us, I realized the most dangerous part wasn't what he might take next. It was what I was already willing to give, the house was too quiet for a Sunday evening. Not peaceful, just empty in a way that made every sound feel intentional. The ceiling fan hummed softly above me, blades cutting the warm air in slow, lazy circles. Outside, the sky was fading from pale gold to bruised blue, the kind of dusk that made shadows linger longer than they should. I watched them stretch across the living room wall and told myself I liked being alone. I didn't. I liked routine. And tonight, something was off. Ethan was supposed to be here by now. He was always on time, early, even. Predictable in a way that felt grounding. When he entered a room, things made sense again. Conversations had structure. Silence had meaning. Without him, the house felt unfinished, like a sentence that had been cut short. I checked my phone for the third time in 5 minutes. No messages. No missed calls. Don't read into it, I thought. I had a habit of doing that, finding patterns where none existed, turning small absences into stories I couldn't stop replaying. Still, my chest felt tight, a low unease settling in as the light outside dimmed further. The clock ticked loudly on the wall. I stood and walked to the kitchen, grounding myself in simple things. The cool counter beneath my palms. The faint smell of coffee from earlier that day. The familiarity of the space helped, at least a little. Then I noticed it. The back door wasn't fully closed. Not open, just slightly ajar. Enough for a thin line of night air to slip inside, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and something sharper. My pulse jumped. I was sure I'd locked it. I stood there, staring at the door, my mind racing through possibilities. Maybe I'd forgotten. Maybe Ethan had stopped by earlier and left without telling me. Or maybe, I shook my head. You're being ridiculous. Still, I didn't move to close it right away. Instead, I listened. The house responded with silence. Thick, watchful. I became acutely aware of myself then, bare feet on cool tile, the rise and fall of my breathing, the way my shoulders tensed without my permission. I hated how vulnerable that made me feel. Hated how quickly my thoughts drifted to him when I felt unsteady. Ethan had a way of making uncertainty feel deliberate. Like it was part of a plan I hadn't been fully briefed on. My phone buzzed suddenly, the vibration sharp in my hand. A message. You alone. No greeting. No explanation. My throat tightened. I typed a response. Deleted it. Typed again. Yes. The reply came almost instantly. Good. One word. Heavy. Final. I stared at the screen, 1,000 questions pressing against my ribs. Where was he? Why hadn't he told me he'd be late? Why did that single word make my pulse race instead of calming me? You can still stop this, a voice inside me whispered. Stop what? Another answered. I locked my phone and set it down slowly, eyes drifting back to the half-open door. The shadows had deepened now, pooling in corners, blurring the familiar edges of the room. Somewhere in the house, something shifted. Not loud enough to be obvious. Not clear enough to name. I stood frozen, heart pounding, a single thought repeating in my mind, quiet, dangerous, impossible to ignore. What if he wasn't late at all, and this was only the beginning?